audience. Welcome to another edition of RB. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Halima Aliyu and I'll be opening... My name is Halima Aliyu and I'll be opening the session before handing things over to our hosts in the name of AS UNOSA. I can see Mr. Abiodun and Miss Laura, please, can you turn on your camera? And AS UNOSA. Oh, thank you. We need one more speaker. Please, just a minute. Let me confirm the other speaker if she's here. Okay, she's here already. Hi, Epi. Please, can you turn on your camera? Thank you. Well, welcome to another edition of RB. It's an honor to have our speakers from African countries. Well, my name is Halima Aliyu, and it's nice to see you all virtually. Well, I'll be opening this session before handing over to our host, who is AS UNOSA. Today's seminar is organized by RB, which is African Real Estate and Business Insight. What we do is we advance real estate and promote sustainable, inclusive development that supports long-term economic and social growth across African continent. The theme of today's seminar is climate risks in investment risks, protecting Africans' urban and infrastructure assets. Okay, we're going to be looking at the impacts of climate change on our cities and critical infrastructure, and to rethink how we plan, invest, and build. It invites us to explore how proactive climate resilience, sustainable development, and risk-conscious investment strategies can safeguard assets, strengthen urban system, and ensure long-term economic stability across Africa. I'll quickly state that this seminar will last for 1 hour, 15 minutes, which will follow up with discussion from the panelists, and a Q&A session will be done at the end of the event. Please, if you have any questions for any speakers, please just drop it in the chat box. I'll quickly hand over to our host, who will guide us through the rest of the program and introduce our speakers. Thank you very much, and over to you, AS UNOSA. Okay. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Halima Aliyu, and I'll be...
So Halima, thank you very much for the introduction. You are highly welcome, everyone, again to the March edition of African Real Estate and Business Insights. As she earlier introduced, here we have conversations on real estate ecosystem comprising of investment, housing, and urban development. We have had series of conversations last year, 2025, discussing how investment generally can be enhanced across African countries. And this year we a bit divert into social inclusion. Let's see how every other aspects concerning energy climate can also affect this noble industry that we call real estate, particularly housing and urban living. And I'm glad to have interesting speakers today with me. In fact, when I saw your profiles, I am gladly impressed because all of you are working in the areas that we are going to discuss today, from Mr. Abiodun to Ms. Laura and the other of my sister that she's currently in Spain. So we knows that climate change now is not a rhetoric anymore. It is now an impact that we can all see. In fact, now in Nigeria, everybody is talking about heat. I know Mr. Abiodun is from Nigeria too. He can attest to that fact that the heat presently is not accommodating. And before we are hearing about climate change, and we all think that it is something that will come in 500 and 1,000 years, but now it is closer than expected. And most interestingly, construction and real estate ecosystem generally is a major contributor to carbon footprint. I think we record almost about 39 to 40 percent of the entire carbon emission. So today, now, holistically, we are going to look at how the effect of climate change, the impact generally, how is it affecting our assets, generally real estate asset, housing, and urban. So because of time, I will leave the room for our panelists. I will call you. You just give a brief introduction so that the people watching can relate with you better before we move into the question proper. Before we start also, I want you to be informed that we are streaming this live on YouTube, and also the session is being recorded. Thank you very much. So Mr. Abiodun, let me have your brief introduction, please.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Please, can you confirm you can hear me, please?
Yeah, clearly, very well.
Good. Okay, my name is Abiodun Fashiluka. As you can see, I work with Arctic Infrastructure as a program manager, water resources. I have my first degree in urban regional planning, my master's in information management. Over the years, I've harnessed over 11 years experience in development program, which cut across watch, CATS, health system strengthening, livelihood, human rights, climate finance adaptation, urban management and planning. I've supported a lot of donor-funded projects in Nigeria, Canada, and Yemen. And I'm a certified project manager, also a watch trainer. And my core expertise is monitoring and evaluation, focus on accountability, transparency, and data-driven decision making. So I good to be here. And Arctic Infrastructure is a private disciplinary firm with broad focus in urban systems. When I say urban systems, I mean housing, housing, transportation, and infrastructure tailored to climate resilience. Presently, we support the Lagos Water Partnership, a platform earmarked to attract funding to the water sector by linking private and public partners together to improve the water resilience of communities in Lagos. Let me pause it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Abiodun. I can see the passion is in continue giving more. Ms. Laura, please, just a brief introduction about yourself so that we can relate better.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, clearly.
Thank you, AS and Halima, for offering me this platform today. So as you can see, my name is Laura Kastuni. I am Kenyan, and I am a civil engineer by profession. That was my undergrad. I went on to do a master's in engineering for sustainable development, and currently I have been working in infrastructure and climate resilience, as well as climate adaptation. I am currently at UN Habitat doing a lot of program management support, and I actually work for the West African office despite coming from East Africa. I am similarly a green building expert. This is through EDGE, which is sponsored by the International Finance Corporation. So I deal with sustainability in the built environment. And I am a founder of a social impact venture, which doubles a little bit into solar energy projects in rural Kenya. So that's a little bit of my profile, and I'm happy to go on to speak more on the topic today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Nice to meet you. Miss Epiphany, do I correct your name right?
Yes, you got it right.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah, so it's really a pleasure to be part of this discussion today. My name is Ephania, and I go by the name Epi. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm currently based in Spain. I'm with the UN Habitant. Nice meeting you, Laura. To know that you're at the same organization. Yeah, so my background, I am a financial engineer by profession, and now I'm more involved into sustainable finance. It's still the same thing, supporting the same initiative, but instead of focusing what I normally tell my father, that I'm still doing finance, but I'm not just focusing on the profit loss aspect, but now I'm looking more into the sustainable development aspect on how we can actually invest more in projects that has long-term investment, and at the same time having those core benefits that are really helpful to the environment and to the people. So just in summary, I'm a sustainable finance expert with more experience in climate finance and financial management. Thank you, and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. You are highly welcome, Epiphany. I know how it is when someone is transitioning from one end to the other. So I love it. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to have a nice conversation with all of you. So now we are going to have a panel interaction. It's no, please let us be relaxed. It's not an interview. We are having a discussion around industry and issues that concern all of us. So I will start with Mr. Abiodun. So from your experience working on water system and urban infrastructure, so how are climate risks already affecting infrastructural performance and urban sustainability in African city? You can use your city as an illustration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. It's such a great pleasure to be discussing this topic here. Like I said, I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. You know, the most expensive infrastructure failure is not just because assets are poorly built. And what I will say is because the risks are not properly managed, they are not understood. So, hence, flooding that shut down entire road network, it results to water shortage, disrupt livelihood, industries, climate risk is already affecting how infrastructure perform and how city also function. So, and all these things created to a lot of problems. And let me just, I will just group it in some maybe three or two insights. But before I go, from my experience in water urban infrastructure system, I believe that climate change is already reducing the reliability, lifespan, performances, and the across Africa, especially Lagos. So, what I want us to look into is, first insight is water system as the first point of failure. Because when we talk about climate risk, we talk about flooding, overall organic we mentioned before on vegetable, cluster water systems that damage housing, calcium network, even drought is also associated to climate change, and which makes water unreliable to drinking. So in many cities, we call infrastructure failure is actually water system failure and drainage, also supply challenges. So, that's the first water system are the first point of failure. Next insight, we see rising cost of declining asset value. You know, because of damage caused by flooding heat waves, there are increase in maintenance costs, rehabilitation costs, short infrastructure lifespan, reduced investor confidence in these areas. There are some areas in Lagos whereby they are more vulnerable, like the Ajibwe Ikorodu, where there is a study already going on there in Lagos whereby they were doing flood vulnerability assessment for households, which is just a gratuity to get information from the residents locally based there, so that it can be used to improve scientific knowledge. Knowledge coming from the community also helping understanding how this affects them. So infrastructure that is not qualitative becomes more expensive to maintain and less attractive to invest over time. This has been happening. You know how climate has been affecting people around the world. So another one side I would like to talk about is the social of urban system and livelihood. You know, because of the issue of a lot of things are not going well. When you discuss mobility, productivity, and also water shortage, which affect also, you know, when the water systems are damaged, water monitoring and also the municipal water agencies struggles. So informal settlement are disproportionately impacted too. You know, there are some settlements there's some informal settlement that sprung up in natural sponge areas that naturally there should be absorbed water, wetlands, river balance. You know, this should be natural water absorbent that should retain water. But because of the informal settlement, it has affected livelihood. So when infrastructure fails, it's not just a technical issue; it becomes an economic and social issue. So what I'm saying here is the reality. Poverty is no longer a future threat. It's already shaping how infrastructure perform today and increasingly. So how sustainable our city can be when we have in terms of our daily activities are also make the original connection have also affected this. So one thing I would like to focus on this is, you know, a lot of things, you know, flooding, extreme rainfall is very intense for panic, school, starvation, city, cities, and housing. So it's also mostly it's also water scarcity affecting our urban population. So one thing I would say is we need to put a lot of things like in Lagos, there are a lot of things, a lot of policies put in place, like the aircraft. Lagos, which has a lot of funds, which cut across environment and is meant to attract traffic, which is kind of the responsibility of managing business for Lagos and also pay into the climate adaptation plan. So all these are what are has been affecting our city. Let me just say for that question. Thank you.
You're muted, AS.
I can't hear you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Laura. Thank you. Mr. Abiodun, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much. At a point, I don't know if I'm the only person. The network was kind of glitches, but what I heard clearly was using Lagos as illustration and how supporting infrastructure like drainage have performed over time. If I get you clearly, thank you very much for that your contribution. So, Ms. Epiphany, let me come back to you now. I think the question I will ask you is similar to what Abiodun just said. Is it similar? No, it's not similar. Let me not ask you that similar question. So your question is this. I know you have worked across multiple regions, structuring climate investment as you introduced yourself earlier. So what are the biggest barriers you think that is preventing climate resilient infrastructural projects in Africa from becoming bankable? I hope
Okay.
you get the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, I do get the question, and thank you so much for that point. And just to maybe just give you that overview from the first introduction that you gave when we started the discussion, that really infrastructure is actually one of the biggest emitter of GHG emission, and actually evidence it shows that about 70 to 80% of GHG comes from infrastructure. So you can see that if we address and invest more in climate resilient, we are able to actually meet some of those climate goals. So, and again, the beauty about Africa is, you know, everyone is always saying Africa is the future. Africa is where urbanizing is coming rapidly. Cities are being transformed. And as you can see, the young population is very massive compared to other regions. So really there is potential. But now when it comes to developing the project, it's really not about the demand, which is the issue. Like I've highlighted, the demand is there. Africa has the hugest population and it has all the resources. But you always find that when it really comes now to coming up with those bankable investments that comes within the region, they are very limited. And it's not because of demand. Mostly it comes back to weak project preparation. Because as you know, most of our projects, they end up being at the same level. That is the concept level. Great ideas which are there to transform the markets. When it comes to the infrastructures, I've highlighted earlier on that urbanization is really advancing in Africa. But the gap is always comes back to when conducting things like feasibility studies to really showcase and give evidence, or to really showcase maybe the financial viability of the project. So sometimes it's also about the financial models. They are not really robust in giving up all the scenarios that if we are to come in as an investor, how can, at the end of the day, can I have an attractive investment? So sometimes when it comes to long-term investments in infrastructure or real estate, that ability to really show that at the end of the day, this long-term investment is able to give me return. That's some of the weakness that most of our projects usually have when we're dealing with infrastructure projects from mostly, let's say, from developing countries. And then, as I've highlighted again, there is demand, but when it comes to showcasing the revenue streams that comes from, let's say, investment in modern cities, because most of our end beneficiaries, these are like you and me, everyone who's part of this panel. But when it comes to the revenue, to really showcase it from a commercial perspective, it's not reliable. And mostly this is because when you invest, sometimes there is this mismatch between risk and return. As you know, most of our investments, like for example, from countries like Nigeria, we invest in our local currency, but some of the items that we need, they are imported from different countries. And again, apart from that, there's always that volatility when it comes to currency. There's also volatility in terms of stability in political arena. So all those things, they bring that uncertainty that at the end of the day, it gives you that mismatch between the risk and return. Because as we all know, that when we are talking about infrastructure, this is not a short-term investment. You're not coming into this investment as like looking for profits today, but rather you're looking for a long-term investment. How are you going to transform the market? So I'll say in brief, one of the key major barrier is this mismatch between risk and return, because when you're talking about climate resilient infrastructure, we are talking about high public value. These are some of the, like traditionally, we have left that investment under the public space. But now, as we all know, we might agree that if we just leave it under public sector, we might not really be able to mobilize all that funds that are necessary for us to transform, let's say, our cities. So there is a need for private capital to come into investment in the climate resilient infrastructure. So again, the main challenge also comes back to that mismatch between risk and return, because we are saying these are public goods. Investors that are looking into short-term returns, they don't have the appetite for long-term investments. And also, just to add on one of the key barrier, which again, this is mostly on the, I'll say on the national on the government aspect, to really create that enabling environment that makes it easy to say, let's say we as a team, we have our financial resources, we want to tap into climate resilient infrastructure. How is our policies helping it? Like, how are they making it easy for private capital to come in? So sometimes one of the key barriers across developing countries, across different regions, is really about weak enabling environment. Sometimes there's really inconsistent when it comes to policies around, let's say, building cores, or even the definition of what we call green investments that at the end of the day support climate resilient infrastructure. So really, this is one of the major challenges, like when it comes to really providing that environment that makes it easier for private capital to come into climate resilient infrastructure. So maybe I'll probably end with one key point, that when, again, one of the main barrier, let's say we want to bring in multilateral institutions, because like I'm sure we all agree that these are long-term investments, and for long-term investment, they become high capital intensive. So sometimes our government, they do have like what we call fiscal distress, which makes it harder for them to focus more on climate resilience, because there's a lot going on. There are different sectors that need investment. So there's really need to tap into multilateral financial resources. But now for them, the key thing that they're looking into is like, how is this project going to transform the market? How is it going to catalyze more resources towards climate resilient infrastructure? So really, one of the key challenges is really bringing in projects that are a little bit silos or fragmented, or maybe a smaller type of project. But rather, when we want to attract those multilateral financial institutions, it's really important to look at the bigger picture, coming with projects that are, like most institutional investors, they are looking more into projects at scale. They're looking more at a pipeline of projects that are able to transform the market. So I'll say one of the key challenges is really fragmentation around the type of projects that most of our investors are looking into. Like everyone is just thinking about, oh, I want to tap into climate resilient investment. So how can I come up with my own project that is going to, let's say I'm going to promote renewable energy. I want to invest in solar energy, but rather let's come up with programs that don't just focus on one area, but rather transform let's say the whole industry in such a way that we are able to tap into renewable energy or solar energy. So in summary, I would say the key main barriers remain being the fact that we have fragmented projects which are more focusing at a lower scale instead of being at a larger scale. There's weak enabling environment. The good thing though, I would really also maybe just to highlight that for most developing countries, mostly African states, they've really done a lot to come up with policies that sort of like really promote climate resilient infrastructure. The only maybe challenge that sometimes is inconsistent, or sometimes they need to be revamped a little bit. But rather, when it comes to policies around that area, most developing countries have that aspect, but rather to just strengthen them so that we can have more private capital that is geared towards climate resilient. So maybe I can just end on to say Africa is really the future. There is really a rapid urban growth. Like from where I come from right now in Zimbabwe, it's like the city, whenever I go back home, I'm always seeing new developments, which means that people do have resources, the demand is there, but we just need to find ways to focus more on just not looking at short-term investment, but rather long-term investment that are looking more into sustainability, into bringing in different actors to promote the same goals. So thank you. That's all from me on this question.
Oh, okay, Epiphany, thank you very much. Thank you. You actually spoke from point of intelligence. And what I pick is for our project to become climate resilience and also to become bankable, you throw it back to us that we need to fix our currency volatility and also the political instability. Then a project should be scalable enough to attract investors, which thank you very much for that, your contribution. Now, Ms. Laura, thank you. I'm coming back to you now. I know you are a technical person, just like myself. So let us leave the policy end to the technical and engineering perspective. How do you think climate change is already affecting presently durability, performance, and life cycle of buildings and infrastructure in Africa? You can use your country as an illustration.
Thank you so much, AS, Epi, and Abedin. Yeah, so a civil engineer again, so I can't speak much on the finance perspective of things. I can speak more on the technical aspects of buildings and infrastructure. And we can see that climate change is already shortening the useful building life. It's increasing maintenance costs, and it's creating performance gaps between what is designed and what the building can actually deliver today. So maybe I'll give two examples, and I'll use Nairobi, which is where I'm from, as an example. Recently, and I mean in the past couple of days and weeks, we have been having floods, especially in the capital city and all over Kenya. And this has led to a lot of destruction of property, which has also led to even deaths of people, I think, as people have seen on the news. And so how does climate change affect the durability, performance, and life cycle of these buildings and infrastructure projects? First of all, one of the main risks or effects of climate change is flooding, and this causes it affects the foundation of the buildings. So the increasing rainfall intensity and volumes, usually coming from short, quick downpours, could lead to overwhelming the drainage systems, where the government was telling us that it is our fault for throwing trash into the drainage systems, or saturating soils, as well as triggering differential settlements. So we'll see foundations in buildings are shifting, tall story buildings are even collapsing within the Nairobi system. And this is leading to, of course, destruction of property, deaths of people, and all that. All these buildings were built were technically sound and used the correct building code. So nothing went wrong during the construction of these buildings, assumably. However, what we were building for was the past history. We were using history to do the construction, but now looking into the future, we're going to have to incorporate climate change, which is causing more frequent downpours. Another one is definitely thermal stress and material fatigue, which is mentioned in Lagos and Nigeria. There's a lot of heat stress, and all across sub-Saharan Africa. So temperatures are rising apparently 1.5 times faster than the global mean. And therefore, in cities like Nairobi, Lagos, Dar es Salaam, we're seeing more frequent heat cycles that are expanding and contracting the concrete, as well as the reinforcement bars that are within the concrete. And these were not factored in the original design tolerances. And this is causing lots of cracking of buildings, corrosion of reinforcement bars, facade delineation, and therefore buildings that were built maybe 20 years ago right now cannot withstand the loading. Maybe just one more example is the shortened life cycle of appliances and increasing operation expenditures. So because of high heat, more expenses being spent on air conditioning, HVAC systems. They're using more loads that they have to, and therefore they're having to be replaced more frequently, leading to higher expenditures for developers and people who are maintaining these structures. So overall, it is increasing costs of maintenance. It is decreasing the durability of the buildings and the life cycle, and it's causing the buildings and the infrastructure to become damaged and destroyed much, much quicker than they would have before, leading to increasing costs of maintenance. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know you are at the forefront, like us, in the technical side. So before I pass the baton to the Mr. Abiodun, I want you to quickly answer this question again quickly. From your portfolio, I saw that you are an EDGE certified green building expert. So what are the practical design and construction strategies do you think we can adopt today to make building more climate resilient?
Okay, quickly. I think I'll preface that by saying Africa already needs around 50 million new homes. as EPI and as all of you have mentioned, the population is increasing. There's a big gap in housing. However, construction itself is causing a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So we are at an impasse. And therefore, green building emerges as one of the solutions that can be used to ensure that as much as new construction is happening, it is done in a sustainable and more resilient way. And therefore, EDGE comes up as one of the many certifications that exists. So EDGE is by IFC, and it's mostly in the context of Africa and Asia. There are others like LEED, which is more in the Americas, and BREEAM, which is in UK and Europe. But I'll speak in the context of EDGE. So what EDGE looks like looks at is decreasing the energy that a building will consume, decreasing the water that the building will consume, as well as the embodied carbon in the material that is used within the building. And so what this looks like in a practical perspective is designing for the future climate and not a historical one. So ensuring that there's use information and data to model what the temperatures are going to be like in the future, the floods, the situation, and using this to design. So if you can start with energy, this could look like having passive design. So this represents maybe window to wall ratio, using green roofs, which are roofs that are covered with vegetation and not like artificial turf. This can be natural ventilation, and this is actually designed for, it's not just open space that you leave for air to pass through. And many others, as well as maybe efficient appliances such as refrigeration and lighting and daylights, as well as smart metering systems, which can ensure that you're monitoring the usage and affecting behavior of the users in the buildings. When we move to water resilience, of course, is non-negotiable because of flood. You have to build for the flood and the drought, and you have to, because water is and it's not infinite. An infinite material, especially in Africa. So this could look like water efficient water appliances. These are shower heads, faucets for the bathrooms and sinks, water closets and bidets that are very efficient. If you can incorporate rainwater harvesting systems to ensure that you're collecting water, and also water treatment and recycling systems that can reuse the water back into flushing the toilets and cooling the HVAC as well as that. And lastly, we look at the material of the building. So what material do you use to do the building itself? As we know, the material carry a lot of carbon. So using durable, locally appropriate materials, such as compressed earth blocks, fly ash concrete, anything that you can find locally that maybe it's not concrete, because concrete in itself carries around 8% out of the 40% of concrete in terms of carbon emissions. So just using locally available materials. And then ensuring also during the operations, you can use renewable sources to power whatever it is you're doing. So for EDGE, if we can do those three things, reduce energy usage by 20%, water by 20%, and materials, using sustainable ones, you can get an EDGE certification, which could lead to more sustainable buildings within the building stock in Africa. And I will stop there and allow the others to speak.
Okay, thank you very much for bringing the technical perspective of the discussion. So I actually want to pull you out because I know you are at the forefront. You are just like the soldier of our discussion. So before I come back to you later. Let me quickly move back to Mr. Abiodun. So Mr. Abiodun, I also saw that you have worked extensively on program monitoring and evaluation. So how can real estate developers like us and also government stakeholders use data and M&E systems to anticipate climate risks and improve decision making for urban development, both housing and infrastructure?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. So, data and monitoring systems are critical because you cannot manage or invest in what you don't know, you cannot measure, especially when it comes to climate risk. So, this climate risk is something is the responsibility of everybody. Let me start with there's need for us to shift from reactive to being predictive in terms of our planning. You know, one thing, please confirm you can hear me, please. I don't want the situation that happened the last time when I spoke.
Yes, I can hear you. I
Good,
can hear
good.
you.
So, okay, there's in terms of to be predictive in planning, what we need to put in place is to use climate and environmental data to identify risk zone. So, in terms of the risk zone, in terms of the high risk zone, medium and moderate, how they are affected, and not only that, when doing this, we pass to the scientific, then use of with the use of satellite imagery to check the development pattern over a 50-year period, 10-year interval to show the certain development that happened over time. And also to also do a ground truthing, go to the location in terms of when it has been mapped out according to the risk, go to the location, meet with the locals in the community to understand the pattern, the seasonal pattern, seasonal calendar. Can confirm that, okay, the rainfall pattern this year is different 30 years ago. There are ways the people have been coping before now. So when you get that information, it will also complement the scientific data you've gotten. So, gratuity in the community, meeting with them, how they are coping during flood hazard, what's best approach they are using to navigate the process. Also, like I mentioned, flood mapping using this like GIS2 and remote sensing to map flooding, to map vulnerability assessment, and this will also be integrated into planning. Like I mentioned the last time, there is a action research for climate that we are presently doing in Lagos in Ajegunle Ikorodu. It's just a pilot research. It's going to be replicated whereby we use the scientific knowledge, but we now go to the community to hear from people that are there in the community, the aged people that have had a lot of experience, what they've experienced in the time past. This we call seasonal calendar to understand the trend. And if this flood hazard happen, how do they cope? This will also help us in integrating this in planning. And one funny thing is, instead of reacting to disaster, data allows us to anticipate when the risk will occur and plan accordingly. Like in Lagos, there's a Lagos Residence Office. All these things are done with their regular strategy. So any development partner coming to Lagos will also have to key into this strategy and flow with it. There's already existing structure for that. Aside that, we also need to strengthen our infrastructure performance monitoring. In terms of, I'm a water person, I always talk about water because when you talk about climate risk, when you talk about housing, water is always there. So water system efficiency, we need to understand there should be a database of water facility across the state to map it out to be able to know, okay, the level of functionality, how efficient it is, and to also engage local water sanitation and ID committee to also be reporting the status at one day. So what is it can be, there's also one system that can be developed to a platform and which we have also implemented in the action research for climate residents. We are presently doing that. Residents in a high risk area can also report this. So also service reliability in terms of these water systems. Okay, when a flood hazard happen, water pipeline will be damaged, a lot of things will happen. Okay, can the government guarantee this? These are data that need to be used for future design, which will also form a basis. I don't do something by saying or by what I have. I will do it with data. So data will also help in shaping future design for opportunity. And system also help us understand not just what feed, but why it feed. How to improve future intervention. This will also be of help. Another thing is supporting better investment decision. Okay, take for instance, investors need to invest in water systems in the state. There's no data about exist inventory of water facility, how it's doing, how the facilities are performing, and a lot of that. How can the project be bankable? So this, if there's data, it can boost investor confidence, and good data reduces uncertainty. And in investment terms, reducing uncertainty is what unlocks capital. So when we're talking about this data, what we need to measure is, okay, the risk. Where are the vulnerabilities? That is, what are assets that are being affected? What location? Are they in high risk region or low risk region? And how do you quantify their loss? That's number one. And that is resilience. What solution exists? Like I said, the action research we are presently carried out, people in the locals in the community, they also have local ways which they cope with this hazard when they occur. So how does that occur? This can also help in designing systems that will make efficiency. Also, policy, international, like I said, Lagos has a lot of regulatory policy that favor investment. Also, I will also talk about the Lagos Star Partnership later. What we are doing at Lagos Star Partnership. All this will also reduce exposure and enhance adaptive capability. So when all these data are put in place, then the return, that is, it will attract and sustain investment. So it will not be the project bankable, because when there is data, there is bankability. So the collection, these three lines, risk, resilience, return, is something to look into when investing in infrastructure. All these data are very useful. So what I will say is, when we're talking about another thing is embedding data into policy and public-private partnership framework. Like in Lagos, there's a PPP law that supports investment, that supports monitoring and evaluation. Government can require a climate risk assessment. Like I will talk about the work we do at Lagos Water Partnership. So integrate M&E into PPP contract is also a good way to ensure that we boost bankability and investors' confidence. The data are used for accountability, long-term system. Like I mentioned earlier, early warning system is also a way to go. It's also a way to go for this. So ultimately, data and M&E system are not just a technical tool. They are decision-making tools that help us to design smarter infrastructure, reduce risk, attract more sustainable investment. So all in all, when we talk about data is very important. You can't tell me that an investor is coming to invest in a country, in a state, and there is no existing data to boost his or her confidence. You will not be able to invest his money. All in all, this is all I have to say about this. Let me pause there for further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Abiodun. As you are speaking, I know there are more that you wanted to say, but the time is not permitting you to say them. I understand how it is, especially when you are speaking from your area of strength. So you said a lot, so there is no need because of time to be re-highlighting what you said. So quickly, I will go back to Ms. Epiphany. At this point, because of time fast spent, I will join two questions together so that you can take your time to give response to both of them. One of the issues that we also discuss when we talk about protecting investment from climate impact is looking at blended finance. And I love the fact you talk about looking at long-term while considering accommodating climate efficiency in our development. So now, can you help me break down how do you think blended finance can realistically de-risk climate-related investment in urban development? And also, what do you think African development and governments do differently to attract capital on climate finance capital to African continent? Thank you very much. I hope you get the question.
Yeah, I do. I think I did. I'll if I have any follow-up question, I'll ask you. So thanks again for the question. Let me just maybe start by giving an overview of the whole idea of blended finance. So this is actually like a strategic use of public resources and philanthropists' capital to de-risk projects and mobilize additional private capital, mostly in developing countries. So it really combines what we call concessional or lower than market funds with a commercial with that commercial aspect of saying we want to improve the risk return of an investment so that we can have more resources towards a project, or in other words, to attract private investors. So mainly its aim is really to bridge the funding gap, because as we have highlighted throughout the whole discussion, is that there is demand in Africa to urbanize African states. There is demand for climate resilient infrastructure. But now when it comes to the financing gap of really going towards that sustainable climate resilient infrastructure, we need more private capital. Public resources are not enough. So now how can we make it practical? Like coming back to your question, like how can we make it more realistic, especially in the context of Africa? So I'll probably start by saying, once you understand that we need to blend in different resources, we need to blend in different funds that we can get from different partners. The idea is really to start by asking, like, to have that clarity of saying, what is it that is hindering the investment to have more private capital? So really for blended finance to be really realistic in de-risking investments in African context, I would say developers or investors or whoever is developing a project that is trying to address climate investments or climate infrastructure investments. The first thing is to have that clarity of identifying, like, what are the barriers that is making it hard or preventing private capital from coming in. So in other words, in summary, you ask yourself, okay, I want to invest in climate infrastructure, but if I want to have more private capital, what can I do? What are the gaps? So in addressing that question, that's where you can then know what type of resources, by resources I mean funding, you need to blend in for you to be able to de-risk investments or to de-risk that long-term investments and climate infrastructure. So or in the real estate space. So the first thing, like I said, is to really identify the investment gap uh, before even structuring the blended finance, or in other words, identify what are the commercial gaps that makes the investment to have low returns, or the investment to have a long-term payback. Like, what are the commercial gaps that we are trying to address for us to bring in private capital? What are the risk barriers? Is it currency volatility? Is it political instability? Or sometimes even the demand risk, by saying at the end of the day, the end beneficiaries or the people who are going to invest in the green infrastructure or in this modern type of housing that we are talking about in each and every municipality, do they have the capacity to say at the end of the day, of course, I want to take a mortgage that has those green buildings, or that aligns with the climate resilient infrastructure? Also, then the next question would then be to ask, like, what can we do in order to break even or to make the investment bankability? So once we have clarity in those key things, then we can address the question of saying, okay, these are the different types of financing that I need. I need maybe technical assistance, because the main reason is that sometimes conducting the feasibility studies, we don't have that institutional knowledge within the space, or we don't have that institutional knowledge when it comes to, like, most multilateral financial institutions these days, they're talking about bring in different actors. They are talking about a systematic approach where they're supporting more local engagement, by local municipality being the one leading this type of green buildings, or transforming from the local type of housing to have more housing that are more sustainable. But then the issue maybe like we don't even have that technical aspect. So that's where we can talk about, when you're blending of when you're structuring your project, you then have to ask yourself, okay, so then I need technical assistance. And there are different ways to get that technical assistance. You can get it directly from multilateral institutions. For example, that there's Africa Development Bank, there is also the World Bank, there's the Green Climate Fund, there's the Green Global Green Institute. So all those different institutions, they can provide that technical aspect. So again, coming back to the type of blended finance that you need for you to really address climate resilient infrastructure. Then after having that understanding, then match the right instrument, because like we're saying, you want to address a challenge, but what different financial instruments that you can use. And when you're talking about blended finance, there's no one approach or one financial structure that you can use. Sometimes you use techno assistance that I was talking about, which is more feasible when you're talking about early stage risk identification, or maybe you want to bring in private investors, but you need to take out that early stage risk. So there are different grants that can be provided for us to be able to de-risk and then bring private investors, or maybe to even structure, like we are talking about climate risk. You find that mostly projects, when you're talking about climate infrastructure, they're focusing more on different aspects. They're modeling different aspects. They're not really putting into aspect that climate risk, being able to have scenarios that shows, okay, if there are floods, if there are this, like putting it into a financial or monetary aspect. So that again, you need technical assistance. So there are different resources that are aligned towards that area. Then sometimes it's really not about saying we don't have the technical assistance, but rather we were talking about it's a long-term investment. So investors are more concerned about the attractiveness of the IRR. So what can we do to improve the return? Then we can talk about concessional loans, first loss capital, which again, we have the government sometimes can even provide that concessional loan, or sometimes the government can come in with a little amount so that we can get from the government. Then we can use the same funds to then attract maybe resources from those multilateral financial institutions. For example, the Green Climate Fund, the World Bank. The World Bank has different climate institutions that are actually there to address to address issues around climate finance. So we have Climate Investment Fund, we have Adaptation Fund, we also have the GEF. So all those financing mechanism are there to provide, for example, first loss capital or concessional capital. Then when it comes now to say, okay, it's really about political risk, it's just really about the volatility in currents or the off-taker default. So in that aspect, we need to blend in different types of financing mechanism. For example, we can talk about having a guarantor or having that insurance mechanism that again can come from financial institutions like the Africa Development Bank, partnering with them, or even locally by having those institutional investors to come in and say, okay, you want to provide mortgage around green cities or green buildings. So you, as a developer, you need those resources. We are going to guarantee you to say, okay, in the event that there's volatility, we are going to hedge that risk. So this again, you trying to blend in those different aspects by really having that understanding of saying what is the gap that is hindering private capital. So maybe I can just close up this first question by summarizing to say blended finance is really the solution. There is no like one solution. You blend in different financing mechanism or financial instruments, but for you to be able to know which instrument do I need to use, then there is need for clarity of saying what are the gaps that are making private capital to come in. So it differs in each and every stage that you are in. Let's say in promoting green investment around climate infrastructure, climate resilient infrastructure. So it's really cool to understand the gap, and after doing that, then you start to ask yourself, okay, so what is it that I can do to bring in private capital? Okay, do I need to provide guarantee? Do I need technical assistance? And where can I get it? Or do I need subordinated debt? So these are all different mechanisms to really address for blended finance to be effective. So maybe if you can remind me again of the third question. I think I've already forgotten that part. Hello, I was just asking if you can remind me the third question. You're on mute, so I cannot hear you.
The question is, what do you think
Mhm.
players like developers, private sector players, and government should do differently to attract this capital
Okay.
into Africa?
Okay,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, thank you so much again for reminding me of that question. So really, I would say for the government is always the key player for even for climate resilient infrastructure to have more private capital. We need to have the government needs to create an enabling environment that makes it easy for private capital to come in. So I would say for government, it's really important that they create a predictable investment environment that with clear, let's say, for example, public-private partnership framework, because most of the time when we are talking about, let's say, investment in like in clean energy, the best model that has been used in the history is the use of public-private partnership. So I'll say for the government, it's really important that there is that clear public-private frameworks around that area and enforceable contract. For example, these are type of very huge, massive investment that requires a lot of for example, around land management and environmental aspects. So those are some of the areas that the government can come in by providing an environment that makes it easy for private capital to come in. And also it's really important to have that policy consistency when it comes to creating an environment that makes it easy for private capital to come in. So I'll say that's the key thing for the government to make it easier for private capital by providing an enabling environment. And also I'll say for the government, it's also important to help in by like I highlighted in my first intervention that for investment in climate resilient infrastructure, it's important to shy away from focusing more on silo project, but rather look more into a holistic approach or a systematic approach that is mostly focusing on how can we transform the market, how can we create a market whereby we are all investing in climate resilient infrastructure. So that for that to be possible, that's where the government needs to come in to help or structure that pipeline in which everyone can feed in. Like I can just say from my experience by working with the Green Climate Fund, I have a lot of partners, individuals from developing countries coming into my inbox on LinkedIn, say, oh, we have this nice project that we think the GCF can fund, or we have this nice project that we think through the Global Green Growth Institute we can partner in to support us to bring this project into life. But you find out that the key challenge is that these are nice projects that people are bringing in, but at a very small scale. So sometimes investors might not be attracted by this project. So it then comes back. Then when I speak to those people and I ask them, so what is the key challenge? They're like, even if they're small project, we don't even know where can we bring them to the government for us to have that pipeline. So coming back to the government, it's really important that through the policy, through our different ministries, have that clarity of building real pipeline that feeds back to what we can say our country priority. Because again, when we are talking about climate change, it's always come back to say what is the climate goals of the country. So when a country come together and come up with their climate goals, from that they also need to then create a pipeline of saying, okay, these are our goals, we are going to attain them by doing A, B, C, D, so let's create a pipeline. So to answer your question, for the government, it's really important that they help in building that real pipeline that help to transform the market, not just project level project, but build the market. So when you're talking about climate resilient as a sector, how can we transform it so that we promote more climate resilient infrastructure related projects? So that's I'll say that's the second point on the government aspect. Then now coming back for developers it's always about profit, right? And for you to showcase that financial viability of saying, okay, as an investor, I'm going to put let's say 8 million or 80 million in this project. we need to be able to give that strong financial model that can really show the different scenarios of saying this project is bankable. So for developers, I would say you have to think like an investor. You need to show by really reflecting the numbers, so that at the end of the day, I can say, okay, this is the clear exit strategy. If I put my money, if you are to fund as an institutional investor, if you are to bring in our resources, what is the exit strategy, and how are we going to gain our returns? Mostly by looking more at the revenue streams, because again, when you're talking about infrastructure investment, the end beneficiaries or the end users are mostly household. So when you're providing that financial model, you need to reflect and show that there is really certainty in terms of revenue. So I'll say for developers, those are the things that are really important to look into when you're developing a project around climate resilient infrastructure. Then it is also important because again, when you're talking about climate infrastructure, how can you model that? And like we always, like, I think that's one of our themes, to say really climate risk is really investment risk. So as you are building your model, as you're building your financial model for this project as a developer, you really need to really treat climate risk as an investment risk, and then try to put into, and then really show the accounting for it, and show the financial viability of a project. And then I would say from that, it's really important that for developers, engage financiers at an early stage. And as I had highlighted earlier, that urbanization is very rapid in Africa, which means demand is there, and infrastructure being the major emitter of GHG, which can actually show that business model of saying we need to transition from one usual way of building infrastructure and adopt more greener investments. So really, I would maybe my last point will mostly be on, let's now focus more on how can we transform the market, and how can we then include all investors. By investors, this is again, I'll borrow from the UN language of saying, can we be inclusive by leaving no one behind, making sure that the transformation is really coming from up going down, meaning to say you and me as local individuals within our government, within our industries, how can we change our mindset by just looking at the short-term profit or at the short-term goals, by looking more on the long-term goals. So by really transforming the market rather than just focusing on silo projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Indirectly, you are saying we developers, beyond profit, we should look at social impact. The message is well taken, despite you communicate it through strategic language. So thank you very much for your contribution. You have said a lot. So Mr. Abiodun, your final note. Our time is fast spent. We have just 10 minutes now to round up the entire session. Please, quickly, your final question, please. What, with your role in Lagos Water Partnership, I think I saw something like that in your description. So what practical lesson can we draw on how people collaboration can drive investment into climate resilient infrastructure?
Okay, can you hear me, please?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. One thing we do at Lagos Capacity is just a coming together of private and public partnership to drive investment to climate resilient projects in vulnerable communities. And it's made up of both people from the municipal department and agency in the state and developer partners. We have African Finance Corporation, Invest International, a lot of financier, DFIs, project financier, developers, and like all senior officers in the government cycle. And we have over 80 members across in the Lagos Water Partnership, and it's taken in such a way that when we first is to understanding the system in urban in terms of assessing the resilience, developing action plan, implementing strategy, are the types of problems which are the insufficient data, on wash umbrella policy, understanding of ground data and waste management. So all this, the Lagos State Partnership has 5 different working groups. We have finance working group, regulation, coastal resilience, project mobilization, development, development planning. So, each group has their different thematic focus. For finance, the focus is assessing viable finance model, investment roadmap, and for key water projects. And they have made a lot of contributions so far. I will just run by, but later I can share some resources as regards that. So regulation, what they do, they look into critical projects, like I mentioned, ERCAP the last time, Lagos Climate Adaptation and Resilience Plan. So all the priority projects in Lagos State are drawn from this ERCAP policy, whereby what we do is we unlock investment, big barrier to investment so that investors can flood in. We also have coastal resilience and the like. So each working group is made up of members from the private and public sector based on their expertise. So we have a lot of we have some priority projects and achievements so far, and we have in this project we have some of the members have also funded some project specific study to feasibility study, kind of what person to ensure that okay the systems attract investors. We also help unlock regulatory barrier that in the investors that has to do with attracting investors. And so far so good. So far so good. There have been a lot of projects that a lot of development in finance institutions have been interested in. They are currently carrying out feasibility study of this project. Some projects have even gone through PPP procurement, and other projects will also come on board. And these projects are being funded by development partners, not the government. And the leading effect is that the state government have now been charged to increase budget for infrastructure financing, like the 2026, like the recent this 2026 budget, there is increased budget for wash funding. There is a budget for infrastructure financing, project targeted study also, and also the government also finance the intelligent wash management system for wash data. All in all, what I'm trying to say is Lagos State Partnership is a platform that helps unlock investment opportunity for, for investors to flow in the state and to also ensure that the projects are bankable and investment viable. So let me just round up here. That's all about Lagos State Partnership. Probably later I can share some materials to for further reading. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You actually keep up with the time since we are rounding up. Miss Laura, finally, your last question. I'm a developer. I can relate to this question too. This climate resilience incorporation, we normally see them as an added cost, maybe due to fear of our clients will not be able to afford it, and also maybe due to immediate pressure. So from your experience as a technical practitioner, how can we reposition climate resilience and green building practices as long-term value into our project development that our people will find it welcoming to accommodate?
Thank you so much. I think Epi and Abiodun have made very good points, so I won't belabor most of them. And in the interest of time, I'll just give a light touch on a few that I had written down. So the first one is reframing the conversation as risk pricing. So a building or infrastructure that is constructed right now in conventional standards and doesn't take into consideration climate resilience is not cheaper. It is just deferring the cost to a later time or to a different person, perhaps the tenant or operational risk. So take that into consideration. It's still going to be paid for somehow, somewhere by someone. And then we can take into consideration the green premium. So this is when, let's say like in Nairobi, you can let's say you're a landlord, you can have tenants pay much, much more for your property that is green and sustainable, and hence you can recoup your losses in that way. Another point is taking into consideration the life cycle cost as opposed to the line item cost. So most probably, if you do a green building, perhaps it's going to be more expensive. CapEx, so upfront cost might be more expensive, but within the product or the building life cycle, this cost is going to be offset by operational costs. So that's definitely something to consider. And lastly, I will mention the regulatory and policy direction of travel. Here, especially in Kenya, there's a lot of policy on resilience and sustainability, and this ensure that even as a developer, as whoever you are within the built environment, even if you don't take into consideration sustainability and climate resilience right now, it is something you might need to pay for later. And retrofitting might be much, much more expensive than just taking it into consideration right now, considering how the world is going and how the continent and especially your country, the general direction in which policies are being made. So I think those are just a few points to take into consideration. And yeah, I'll leave it at that, probably in the interest of time. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. You said one thing interesting to me. We are just deferring the cost. It's not that the cost is not there. Thank you. So as we are rounding up now, just in one sentence, if we fail to incorporate everything we have been discussing about climate resilient building, climate resilient practices in our construction and development, in 10 to 20 years, look into the future, what do you think will happen? Just in one sentence.
I can go first. Perhaps what can be seen, damaged and destroyed properties will lead to probably increase in property costs, increase in insurances, this which might be passed down to the consumers, so more expensive houses to be sold and less sales to be made. So just expensive all around, and the pain is going to be felt by everyone within the sector. So something to consider.
Thank you. Miss Epiphany, please, if we did not put all this thing into practices, what do you think will happen 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, so I think I like what Laura said. I'm probably just going to repeat, but with different words, that we are just looking in financial loss. Instead of addressing it, we are looking at for 10 years, 20 years to come. So better act now and invest, do smart investment, invest in sustainable infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abiodun, your own take too on if we fail to act 10 to 10 years.
Yeah, if we fail to act, I'm seeing properties and infrastructure in high-risk area will lose their value, making them less attractive. And also, investors will demand high-risk premium, you know. So also, I can see people that fail to introduce resilience, maybe on unusable or obsolete before the end of their economic life. So what I would say is, ignoring challenges today means we are not just building infrastructure, we are building future liabilities. So in the next 10 to 20 years, those liabilities could define the stability of Africa, Africa's real estate and infrastructure market. So let me just say thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Abiodun. Thank you very much, everyone. Miss Laura, Miss Epiphany, thank you very much for sharing your wealth of experience with us. It's actually meant a lot, and we have a lot of enlightenment today. So is there anybody that have any question? I have been typing in the chat box. Anybody with any question to drop it so that we can attend to it. If you have question here, the essence of coming to the Zoom is that you can actually raise your hand and you ask your question. So if anybody have any question from the audience, do you have any question? Is there anything any of our panelists said that you think you know better or you want to make contribution to it? Just 1 minute. Anybody? Wow, okay. It means the session today is very enlightening, and it speaks to our current reality. So the essence of this conversation is we have known better, and what is expected of us is for we to be an advocate of what we have discussed, pay attention to this topic at your places of work, and also be an advocate for it. And at the end of the day, we are going to get it right and Africa will be better. Thank you for everyone for listening, and thank you, my able panelists. So if any of our panelists here, if you are yet to join the group, the community of our previous speakers, you can communicate to me via WhatsApp immediately after the section. I will add you there. The essence of having the community of speakers is for we to be able to form partnership and collaborations among ourselves as across Africa. So thank you very much. At this point, I'll hand over to Halima to close down the section.
Oh, thank you, yes, UNOSA, for hosting this event on climate change, and thank you our distinguished speakers for sharing your time, knowledge, and perspective with us today. Your contribution have not only deepened our understanding of the subject climate change, but also it has also inspired meaningful conversation and new ideas. We look forward to future opportunities. Hopefully we can collaborate again in any team that you might be interested in. I wish you all a great weekend and have a lovely weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Halima.
Okay.